Thank you. And Tony's going to give us some gathering music. I love this song. We can sit. Good morning. My name is Jane Ford, and with me, I'm the worship associate, and with me is Sally. You want to stand up a minute? Most of you, I think, know Sally Gwin-Cook, and she's going to be our, I guess they call it homilist. I call it featured speaker, but you'll be hearing more from her later. Just a couple of announcements. In the bulletin has all the announcements, but Emily highlighted, Reverend Emily highlighted a couple. The first of all is, I want to take a look at the painting. Many of you knew Lilius, the work she has done. She does wonderful work. She was a longtime member of our community and a gifted and prolific artist. After the service, we welcome you to come across the street because there's a wonderful display of her artwork of all different types there. And the second one, which have got lots of highlights, is Saturday night is our lasagna dinner and auction. And we just happened to be a few of us in the field house yesterday. And I don't know if it's the actors or what, but there's a group of people there. They came over to us and said, what time is the auction? Tell us about the auction. So they told us they were going to come. We'll see. There's a lot more information about how you can help out. Bring lasagnas so that Diane doesn't have a heart attack and have to cook 22 lasagnas herself. But take a look at the bulletin. And that's enough announcements. Everything else is in your bulletin. Okay, so now it's time for our welcome and chalice lighting. So Sally's going to join me to light the chalice. And we do this as a ritual lighting that we follow with all across the world on Sunday mornings. This morning, we light the chalice with a quote from our beloved Bishop Desmond Tutu, the South African bishop who gave so much to the world and world peace, who died 4 months ago. And it's very brief. The bishop says, differences are not intended to separate, to alienate. We are different precisely in order to realize our need of one another. Thank you. Okay, so now if you are willing or able, do you want to stand up or stay in your seats, whichever, and join us in our opening hymn, which is number 1008, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. Next, Sally is going to lead us in the pastoral prayer.
Our prayer this morning is to love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. In the sweetness of friendship, let there be laughter and sharing of pleasures. For in the dew of little things does the heart find its morning and is refreshed. Please join me for a few moments of silent reflection. Jane will now bring us our reading for this morning.
Thank you, Sally. This morning's brief reading is from Parker Palmer, an educator, speaker, and writer whose spirituality shines through all he does. He says, "In a true community, we will not choose our companions, for our choices are so often limited by self-serving emotions. Instead, our companions will be given to us by grace. Often they may be persons who will upset our settled view of self and world. In fact, we might define true community as the place where the person you least want to live with always lives." And this now leads us into our community's request at the offertory for any gift you may feel free to give or not. It's your choice. But unlike the church I grew up in, with the larger church supported the smaller church if things didn't go well, we as a Unitarians are committed to our larger UUA and actually contribute, significantly to them over the years. So all the money that comes in to us is directly spent on this congregation, and we're grateful for all the blessings you have brought. Out the glasses. The offertory anthem is "No Greater Gift." Once the choir is settled in, Sally is going to give us words of wisdom for a Sunday morning. Thank you, choir and Tony. That was beautiful.
I want to first thank Reverend Emily Bruce for this opportunity to speak, and to Jane Ford, Joan Thompson Stein, and our music leader, Tony Carlin, for all their assistance. Exploring the eighth principle. Is it time for a new covenant? Good morning. When I was asked to make this presentation today, I was told I was free to select any topic I wished. And the idea that was fresh in my mind flowed from an excitement circulating in the church around the so-called eighth principle. An idea aimed at creating a new and more inclusive covenant to be joined with the existing 7 principles of the UUA denomination. I decided to delve further into this topic, and I became inspired to share with you what I discovered. Before beginning, I want to share with you a little about my background as a neighbor and friend of First Parish, Kingston. Many of you may know I have been married to Arlie Cook for over 35 years. And he is an African-American man whom I actually met while attending Boston University. As a multiracial couple, we began our relationship at a high tide of the civil rights movement, and at a time when couples of different races were not accepted as they are now. In fact, in 1967, the United States Supreme Court removed the historic ban on interracial marriage in the famous Loving versus Virginia case. Lee and I have worked and have been committed to ending racism and injustice together, both within ourselves and outside within the communities we have lived in. We are also multicultural in more ways than one. We are proud to have a grandson who was born in Brazil to a Brazilian woman who our son married. Let's look at some relevant aspects of UUA history, past, present, and perhaps future. The current UUA of today, which was founded in 1793, was originally named the Universalist Church of America, and then became the American Unitarian Association in 1825. But even before its birthday in 1793, in 1790, the Universalists governing body passed a resolution calling for the gradual abolition of slavery. The source of inspiration for this proposed 8th principle of the global denomination of UUAs did not emanate from either Europe or other communities of UUAs around the world. Momentum for it originated from the American communities. The question has been asked, why did the 8th principle originate in America? The answer is, it originated naturally from the founding of the Republic of the United States, which was based on the institution of chattel slavery and the conquering of native tribal peoples. To begin our talk today, let me share a quote from Satya Mandani, a UU youth of color, on his reaction to learning about the project to create an eighth principle. And I'll quote, "I am deeply moved by the conversations about anti-racism and anti-oppression that have resulted from the eighth principle movement. As a young person, I am also excited to see the impact this project may have on Unitarian Universalism my generation inherits," end of quote. But before we examine the eighth principle itself, let's first examine the original text of the first 7 principles and how these came to be. Number 1, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Number 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Number 3, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Number 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Number 5, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregation and in society at large. Number 6, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And number 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. The first 6 UUA principles were affirmed by 1985, and the 7th principle was affirmed by the UUA General Assembly in 1995. The 8th principle, it has been said, was inspired because of the continuing existence of systemic racism and the residual effects of discrimination dating back to the time of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., the mid-1960s March on Washington, and struggles for civil and voting rights and school desegregation. These contemporary struggles for multicultural rights have broadened to include all individuals of color and indigenous members of American society as well. Throughout this long, violent history within our nation, many Americans from different religions and backgrounds have struggled in common to make us a more perfect union. There are numerous examples of the contributions of members of UUA from within America and around the globe. Some of the highlights of this history and some of its heroes are included here. In 1784, Benjamin Rush, a Universalist, was a founder of the Pennsylvania Society for the Abolition of Slavery. In 1859, 4 of the Secret 6 who financed John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry Armory were Unitarians and included the Reverends Theodore Parker and Thomas Wentworth. In 1863, Unitarian Robert Gould Shaw, a white man, was named colonel to lead the 54th Regiment of the Massachusetts Infantry, the first regiment of African-American volunteers from the North to fight in the Civil War. The movie Gloria is based on this. And we do have a distinguished guest, my aunt-in-law, Rosetta Crand, who my husband has introduced you to already. In the 1950s, Whitney Young Jr., former president of the National Urban League, joined Atlanta UUA Church and served on its board. Reverend Martin Luther King was a strong supporter of the UU Church and popularized the concept of beloved community. He gave the Ware Lecture in 1966 at the General Assembly. In 1965, members of the UUA participated in the march from Selma to Montgomery in response to the murder of Jimmy Lee Jackson, an African-American, by an Alabama state trooper. James Reeb, a white UU minister, was murdered in Selma, Alabama during Black voting rights campaign, as well as Viola Liuzzo, a white UUA member from Detroit, Michigan, who was murdered along with the Black passenger. 1965, African-American Henry Hampton became the UUA Assistant Director of Information. He became the award-winning executive producer of the documentary TV series Eyes on the Prize. And in 1979, the Reverend Jesse Jackson delivers the Ware Lecture at the General Assembly. I will now quote from the 8th Principal Commission statement. Quote, Unitarian Universalism is no stranger to movements that call for racial justice both within and beyond our institutions. Over and again, pockets of people have worked to say racism is a problem. Racism is a problem for us, and that we are committed to fighting racism and other oppressions. In 1997, the General Assembly voted to commit to intentionally becoming an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, multicultural institution. Yet, almost 25 years later, we continue to fall short of our commitments and promises, end of quote. When the 8th Principle Project began, it addressed something vital that had been missing to our UU movement, namely that anti-racism and anti-oppression must be central to congregational life and our community building. The mammoth project of fostering conversation within congregations and other communities has become a true groundswell within the Unitarian Universalism. The text of the 8th Principle says, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse and multicultural beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. This 8th Principle Study Commission has been charged with the historic as well as exciting task by the UUA board of submitting its proposal for a promising new covenant in January of 2023. My husband Lee and I are inspired, optimistic, and hopeful as well. Although there are at least 156 churches throughout the United States who have approved it, there are also 6 UUA churches close to us here in Massachusetts that have also approved it. We hope and pray that the people in our state and our community here will come to see the merit and benefit of adopting this new principle. And we hope its expeditious and popular adoption will move us closer to what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and countless others of a similar sentiment have striven for since our democracy's founding. And that, of course, is to create a beloved community, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. May it be so. Thank you. And I want to give a special, special gratitude to my husband, Lee, who was an invaluable source of support for this presentation. Thank you. We will now be joined together in our hymn number hymn number 118. Thank you. Let us, this little light of mine. I believe it's in your teal book.